Right. Hi, everyone. Heather here with Astrology.com. And today I am back with Amy, who's one of the brilliant psychics on this channel. Hi, Amy.
Hello. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. I'm really happy we were able to connect to do this and to talk about this topic in particular, because I know that we both have, a good amount of experience working with this sort of energy. And so today we're talking about narcissism, psychic vampires, that type of thing, and how it shows up in the birth chart, how it shows up energetically, and what to do to create appropriate boundaries to sort of protect yourself against these types of things and to be more discerning, right? To be more discerning so you can figure out what's going on so you know what action to take. And so, yeah.
It sounds like a great idea, to be honest. There is so many, the thing is, there's a lot of people out there in the world that have no idea that psychic vampires exist, and they do. And they have no idea that they could be living amongst as like an energetic vampire, if you like. And I think, to be honest with you, I did touch on this a little bit on Monday on my live stream, where I did mention about people that are leeching onto you for their own personal gain. And the response was unbelievable. People were like, I know somebody that's like this. Everybody, I think, does, but it's about whether that, I suppose, like I asked you, and I basically, to everybody that doesn't know, I messaged Heather the other day and I says, does narcissism apply to the birth chart, or can you be born a narcissist, or does it come later in life? And that's where we kind of just got onto this idea, didn't we? Like,
Yeah. And the response to that question is that it actually does show up in the birth chart in very specific ways, but it's kind of on a spectrum. Like, a lot of people will show up and utilize that energy to manipulate other people. They will, come across as being narcissistic, or they will actually be narcissistic, or they'll be a psychic vampire, or they'll attract that energy from other people. If you don't act on a certain energy in your birth chart, you attract it from the outside. And so really the end goal is to maintain a certain level of balance and equilibrium, where you're utilizing your sort of discernment, your gifts for understanding people, for your gifts for manipulation to a certain extent, but you're using them for good and not evil. And maybe you're using them to thwart the vampires, right? But without actually being manipulative in a way that's overtly detrimental and negative to other people. And another thing too that I find is that when it shows up that there's lack of boundaries in the birth chart, it becomes much harder for people. And so Neptune afflictions, Saturn afflictions, a lot of Pisces, a lot of Neptunian energy, especially when it's aspected in a way that's difficult, can show up as a lack of energetic boundaries, a lack of appropriate physical boundaries even sometimes. And so that can make you much more susceptible to drawing these people in and not having a good way of getting rid of them. And so that's really important to sort of note as well. So, and again, that both sides of the spectrum, because Neptune and Pisces can be a little deceptive as well. So it does go both ways. But yeah, so there's a lot of different stuff that can show up in the birth chart that indicates, narcissism, being a vampire, being manipulative, all these types of things. But if you don't act on that energy yourself, you'll find it coming in from the outside. And that's just kind of the way that it works with astrology. It shows up in one way or another. If you choose not to act on it, if you have that self-awareness, it will, take hold. It will come in from the outside. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine it does, actually, because like we was just talking briefly before we started recording, and we're saying about how my Neptune is in Pisces. Now, for me, as a non-professional astrologer, if you like, I'm still a basic learner, and I always assumed, Neptune, Pisces, that's amazing, it's a really great, I'm pretty certain Neptune is my ruling planet, so it's kind of like I feel at home there. But for me to have, the only issue I have is I'm too trusting, and everybody has said throughout my entire life, Amy, you are too trusting, you gravitate towards people that are very toxic to you, and they have a tendency to use you, manipulate you, and then throw it back in your face and make you look like the bad person. And I don't see it until it's too late. And I think that's my massive problem. But the thing is, you see, genuine people have this issue, where you will have people that say they will be drawn into your life, and they'll say, right, this person's easy to manipulate, this person's naive, or I was bullied all the way through secondary school or high school. I was bullied all the way through because I remember sitting in the school office. We had like a school nurse that did like the bullying counseling. It was really cringy, but never mind. And these girls who were bullying me and just myself were sat there, and I said, I forgive you. And the school nurse, she was like, what? Like, why would you forgive these people that like tormented you to the point where you wanted to end your own life? Like, why would you want to forgive them? And I just went, because I just can't be bothered with it. Like, I can't be bothered with the drama. And therefore I walked away. And the bullies were like, we've won. But really, I won because I released that energy. And little did I know it would lead me to living quite a compassionate life. But it is about, a lot of us do have issues with, attracting that kind of energy, because we feel like, oh yeah, but we're being too harsh if we let them go. No, sometimes you have to be selfish in that way and say, no, do you know what? You're leeching me of my everything. I want you gone. And that's essentially that. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And so that was like a moment of empowerment for you, right? Which is a very sort of Pluto thing. And Pluto is one of the planets, when it's dysfunctional, that can attract people that are bullies or vampires or that abuse their power, right? And hold their power over your head and that type of thing. So it's a lot of power struggles that you have to deal with having, not only just a Scorpio rising can draw that in anyway. People are either really magnetized and drawn in by that Scorpio rising energy, or they're sort of intimidated by it, so they might act out in some sort of way.
I think it's 100% both.
It is both. It is both. And you'll get some of both. And then you'll also get the people that are drawn in because they sense that you have that power, you have that energy, and they want to, feed off of it. And also having Pluto, my teacher, Lynn Coiner, talks about one of the hallmarks of the psychic vampire is, or being susceptible to psychic vampires is a dysfunctional Pluto. And she has a really great article about it. It's somewhere, on the internet. You can search it, probably on Google, but she talks about how, Pluto Scorpio types, they do have the ability to like sniff people out and to be very discerning. You can pick up on the subtle nuances of other people's behavior, their mannerisms, those types of things, to really read people. And that's why, Scorpio people make good psychics and good astrologers and things like that, because they're always trying to figure people out. But sometimes, if they're not acting on that energy in a way that's appropriate, or if the Pluto is really afflicted, especially with squares or inconjunctions, it can turn to the point where that person either becomes very manipulative, because they do have that ability to figure people out, to play the game. It's always about who has the power and how can I take hold of it and how can I use it, right? And that's a very Pluto thing. That's a very Scorpio thing. And so when your Pluto's afflicted, you can act on that in a way that's detrimental, or you'll draw that in, right? You'll draw in people who are manipulating you in that way. And so you have to learn to be very discerning and to put up a really good boundary. And I think the people who have it hardest in terms of dealing with this energy are going to have also a really strong Neptune and Pisces influence, or an affliction to Neptune and Pisces. One of the ones Lynn Coiner mentions, which I have, is a Mars-Neptune square. And so that can make it so you have very loose boundaries. You have, you're a little too open, to other people's influences, to other people's energies. And so when
that sounds like me, Heather.
Yeah. And you have Neptune in an inconjunction, right? And so that's part of it too. And so when you have these afflictions, you have to learn how to work with this energy instead of allowing it to sort of just take hold over you and just become the victim of the energy. And so setting appropriate boundaries is really, really important. And people always ask me, like, what do you mean by boundaries? I don't really understand, what that means. But that means saying no to people, cutting them off. If it doesn't feel right, you don't have to do it. Not taking on too much of the burden of responsibility for other people's stuff. Learning to discern between your responsibility and somebody else's responsibility. That's a huge thing for people who have especially Saturn and Neptune afflictions. And so just having really good, knowing yourself is going to be first and foremost. Know thyself, right? Know yourself, know your own limitations, know your own needs. And from there, you can discern, what's appropriate and what's not when it comes in from the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you something, you nailed it to a T there, because there is two pointers when you were talking then about things I picked up. There was a lady, I did a massive, to those that don't know, that I did mention it on Monday, I did have a massive Facebook call on my personal Facebook. I had like 600-700 friends, and I just thought, none of you communicate with me. Why are you even here? Like, there's always the psychic vampires, or the vampires that sit in the corner and they're waiting for you to have, like, maybe write a status about something negative, and they're there straight away, like they leech onto that. But if you're writing something public and they're very positive, they're like, ugh, sort of thing. And there was a lady that I know from my village, and she said to me, she says, oh, this woman deleted you on Facebook the other day, Amy. And I says, oh, right, why is that? I didn't even notice. That's how bad it is, but hey ho. And she said to me, oh, because you're overbearing, like you're overpowerful, like you're too positive for these people around here. And I thought, okay, right, if I'm too positive, then I'm so sorry for that, you know. It's you know, but they would rather, these kinds of people, rather you be negative, so they have some energy to leech off. They can't leech off positive energy. They can't. It's like their kryptonite, you know. It's like, positive, you know. But the other thing, I read for 6 people last night at this psychic party I did, and in their Pluto, it was all Sagittarius, but 2 was in Scorpio, and they were the most, I would say, psychic of, or the most receptive, or the most intuitive people. And this lady I read for, she had like a triple Scorpio there, and it was like Scorpio, like majority of her chart was Scorpio, and it was like, whoa. But she was so open, like she walked into the room and it was like this energy just radiated off her. So I think that if I was quite a manipulative person, I could twist her thoughts, you know, like it would be that bad. But I said to her, I was like, you are too open, you're too receptive, you need to close that down a little bit, create some boundaries. Because she said, oh, I've just gotten out of an abusive relationship. And yeah, it happens where we are quite, you know, like you say, I'm an open book. I'll tell anyone my life story because I have nothing to hide. But people can take that the wrong way, leech on it, and manipulate that to suit their own needs. And it's quite a shame, but it is, I would say, progressively getting worse, but so is the positive energy. There's always that balance. Like we were saying, love and hate is the same thing. It's like, you know, it's on the same frequency. And, you know, yeah, it's one of those things where you're going to attract these people in your life, but you have to be aware of when they come in. These people come across as these nice, I call them nice narcissists.
Yes.
They come across on the exterior like, hi everybody. And let me say to you guys that will be watching, in the psychic world, in the industry, there are fakes. There are people that come across as, look at me, I'm this nice psychic, and they're not. And I've had to work with people like that before, and it's awful when you see it for what it is, but you can't be the one that, you know, calls them out, because then you look bad. So you have to just let it happen, and eventually, like the karma thing is, what goes around comes around. But yeah, it's
yeah, and that's another thing too, and that's also something that Lynn Corner touched on in her article and in a class that I took with her, is that a lot of times people who carry this energy, they will end up in these helping professions, either because they're very good at these types of things, right, or because they can use that power, they can exercise that position under the guise of helping people, to manipulate people, to vampire their energy, right? If you go to a reader, like a psychic reader, an astrologer, whatever it is, and you feel drained as hell after you're done with that reading, that is a red flag right there. You should not feel bad, depleted, drained, exhausted. There's nothing about this process that should be exhausting to the person receiving the reading, or, you know, to the person giving it too, if they have appropriate boundaries, right? It can be exhausting if you don't.
Yeah, I know that one.
Yeah, especially when you do too many readings all at once, you start to like loosen up those guards, those boundaries, and then, you know, you can get very depleted very easily. But it shouldn't be like that on either end of the spectrum. So that's always a red flag. So when you're coming to contact, and especially, you know, look at where your Neptune is positioned as well. So when you're working one-on-one with people, if you have Neptune in the 7th house, even if it's just a client, you know, psychic relationship or something like that, then you're going to be more susceptible to deception from somebody who has, from working with one-on-one with someone, you'll be more susceptible to deception, or to this like vampiric energy or something along those lines, that manipulation, because the house you have Neptune in is where you cannot see things very clearly. It dissolves things. It makes things foggy, confusing. It brings in this sort of otherworldly, like mystical energy, but it also provides, it just makes things very confusing in physicality, because Neptune is the most non-physical of all signs. So when you look where Neptune is, that's going to give you a very big clue as to where you're more susceptible to deception. And also the aspects to Neptune, right? If you have Mercury aspect to Neptune, or Neptune in the 3rd house, you're going to be very easily deceived by like other people's logic or through communication, right? So people can rationalize something to you, and then it tricks you into believing them, even though you know in your heart that it's not correct, you know, deep down on the inside somewhere. So it just, looking at where Neptune is a big clue as to where you need to create better boundaries, especially if it's going to be in a house that involves communication and interaction with other people, like the 3rd, the 7th, and the 11th, I think would be most prominent, but also in the workplace, right? If you have it in the 2nd 2nd, 6th, or 10th, which would be the earth houses. So yeah, anyway. I got in a little bit of a tangent there, but I feel like it's helpful information, right? Because it can help you be more discerning as to where you need to be more discerning, right?
Yeah, it's difficult as a Scorpio rising. It's very difficult. I have that Taurus moon right there going, you need to stop, buckling up and paying attention a little bit more. But my Scorpio rising is like, but everyone's nice. Like everybody's really lovely. And then I think the worst thing is when you get hurt, that immediate reaction, if you like, that immediate response to being hurt is like, run. Quick, hide. And I have a tendency to do that. So, if somebody has been really, somebody did it, this village is like toxic central, let me tell you. It's like, somebody nearly crashed into my car, and they took a photo of my car and they posted it on all over Facebook. And it was like, this person can't drive. No, it was her fault. But, she made me feel really embarrassed and ashamed, and I just wanted to hide. And I thought, everybody's talking about me, this is really scary. But then like the Aquarian Mercury side of me, the Taurus moon of me is like, no thank you, we fight back and we actually stand up for what we believe in. And I think that even though people might see, let's say the Neptune and Pisces aspect, people might think for me or for anybody that has that, oh, that's really a negative thing. I think no, it can be very negative because you're more susceptible to being I've been in very abusive relationships, been very abusive friendships, but I look at it as this: I can now identify if somebody is a vampire, if you like. I can see it. And I think the worst part is when you can see it, but not everybody else can. I'm very an awakened person. I have very, very firm beliefs of what, is really going on in the world and stuff like that. If they're not awake and they're just like, oh, you're just talking garbage, it can be very hurtful because I'm just trying to help these people and they just don't want to listen. But again, you have to learn that not everybody will see it. But people will eventually, of course, but it's so frustrating when you are trying your best to help people and they just don't want to know. They shut the door on that. But it's not great. Like
well, that's one of the drawbacks of being a Scorpio. First, you have to go through it, right? You have to go through the betrayal, the manipulation, all of that sort of drama, right? That comes along with having a lot of Scorpio energy or a lot of Pluto energy, or, Mars really strong in the chart. And that's how you learn though, right? Scorpio people and people who have Scorpio rising, they learn very quickly through their experience who to trust and who not to trust. And so it is a gift, but it's also a huge challenge, especially early on in life. And so, especially for Scorpio rising people, I think in particular, but Scorpio sun signs get it to a different degree. And Scorpio moon people, like, that is just a whole nother thing, right? That's a difficult moon to have. Oh my goodness. You can see right through everything and everyone, but it's a very psychic moon, but it's a very difficult moon to have because you feel everything so intensely and so passionately. And when you have a Scorpio moon, usually you don't want other people to read you and to see you in that way. You're very protective of your emotions. So you're having this like a volcanic explosion going on beneath the surface, but you don't feel like you can trust anyone to like confide in them, like that kind of energy. And it can be very, very difficult, but they can be very, very psychic, very attuned. And sometimes so much to the point where they'll like block it out completely because they don't want that, right? It's like too much of a burden and they don't know how to deal with that energy. But yeah, so Scorpio, Pluto, that's going to be like a big thing. So if you have especially Pluto in an inconjunction, that's going to be one where you're dealing with power struggles, manipulation, that type of thing. But you have the ability to be very discerning, very psychic. Neptune in conjunction as well. I did a webinar about inconjunctions where I go into really deep about like every single planet in an inconjunction, which I'm not going to do right now, obviously. But in general, Neptune in an inconjunction indicates boundary issues where you take on obligations that are not appropriate for you, and then you end up like not fulfilling those obligations. And if you don't mind me saying, that is one that you have in your chart because you want to be nice. You want people to love you. You want people to, you're so compassionate and loving in that way, but then you just get yourself obligated to things that you don't necessarily want to do or shouldn't even be doing.
I struggle to say no. That's
Yeah,
my problem.
exactly. That's exactly it. It's like
It's
difficult.
like somebody did this the other week. They asked me, they kept doing it for a long time, and I ended up snapping at them, and I felt awful for doing it. But they kept ringing me like first thing in the morning, can you take my children to school? So it'd mean I'd have to take my children to school, come back, fetch her children, take her children to school, and this is happening like every day. And I would notice I used more gas in my car. I used a lot more of everything, like my time, and it was just like I can't get anything done because I know she's going to call me. And it got to the point where I was like, she had no reason not to take her kids to school, she just couldn't be bothered. And I started to read into that a little bit more, and I started to sense that this girl is just using me. And I never got a thank you, nothing, but I would always do it because it was kind of like, oh, I don't mind, but I did mind at the same time. But eventually I just went one day, I just went, no, I can't. And she went, oh my God, like went crazy. And then she stopped talking to me. And that was I was hurt by that. I thought, well, what, because I said no once, you're now not talking to me as a result of that. But actually that is a typical trait. You know, I find with a narcissist, they will then blame you. You will be the passive aggressive one. They will be passing that, I always call it passing that aggression to you, to make you look like a bad person. But with in the terms of people being a narcissist anyway, they will make you look like the bad person, yet you are actually the victim. You are like what's called the codependent one. And I find it disgraceful actually that people can, they can paint a picture that you are a horrible person, but they play the victim. And I call these people the nice narcissists, where to everybody else they're like God's gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it a lot. I see these people doing it all the time. People love these people and they go, oh my God, these people are amazing. But when you see the real version of them behind closed doors, you think, yeah, if people could see them for what they really are, they wouldn't be thinking that, and they'd be thinking, what an awful person. But you have to just ride it out. You have to wait for them to see it. You know, you have to see it. But as a Pisces, I sense it as well. You know, I sense these things, and my Taurus is going, run away, but I just can't do it.
So we talked a little bit about like the astrology of it and all of that. I mean, there are some other things we can touch on with that, but so you can read energy and you can like see auras and things like that. Is there a certain energetic signature that sort of comes across with people who have these sort of narcissistic vampiric tendencies?
Absolutely. Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. You can see it in their eyes. That's where I start it with. Not obviously not all the time, because some people have these amazingly piercing, beautiful eyes, and you're drawn in, and then they're like really horrible. But no, in the aura, I see darkness. It's like this. I don't know if it's intentional, but I see hurt first. So really, a lot of these people have been through maybe hurts in their past life, and they've brought that forward with a lot of anger. You know, I did watch a documentary once about this guy that was murdered in a previous life, and he came into his new life wanting to seek revenge on his murderer, even though this murder guy is like long gone. And he upheld this anger till he died, and he lived his life as a bitter, twisted old man. And it was really sad to watch that. But I do see it in people's auras. They have darkness, but they can mask that, if you like. If you haven't got that ability to read the aura or read the people that's placed in front of you, you will see it as a person that is very, oh, they're so nice. They're like, it's like the devil dressed up as an angel. Like, that's literally what it is. And they will lure you in. Like, they'll lure you in under that, come, Adam and Eve with the apple, like, come and eat this beautiful fruit, and then they'll get you, and then they'll leech you of your energy. And that's in a nutshell a vampire. I always see I see vampires when they're like drawing blood out the neck. I always kind of relate that back to a psychic vampire leeching out of your soul. Yeah. And the idea is I've had to learn the hard way to bring that energy in. And I was talking about this the other day about, imagining this biofield, imagining your energy, and imagining yourself like literally pulling it in and then almost hiding it, because then they can't leech that from you. And then when you walk into a room with somebody that is toxic, you can ask, you can just ask, please protect me from this energy. But I sense it. When somebody walks in the room, I immediately go, I like that person, or, oh, I'm not sure, the energy is a bit off. I've read for people before, and I'm going through the Skype call, and it's the first probably 5 seconds I get an idea of what they're going to be like during that reading. They're either going to be, they're not going to speak to me and they're just going to listen, or they're going to engage and they want to know. But it's fine. It's either way you want to be. But I've always noticed that if somebody's doing it to, you know, take the mic, or if you like take the mic, they're doing it to make fun. You know, you just know, and you just get someone emailed me the other day, and I just read the email address and I went, okay, I don't know why that email address seems off to me, but it does. I clicked it. Can you tell me the lottery numbers? I need to win this week. And I'm like, yeah. if I knew, I wouldn't be sat here in a tiny little village. I would be somewhere hot and nice, you know. But yeah, that's it. It's, you just I sense it, I think, more than anything. But if I read their auras, oh dear, some of them are really dark, and I see it every single day, and it can be, it's very overwhelming. It's almost like little demons are following them around. It's not nice.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's a handy skill to have, but that's probably kind of a burden as well.
It's a huge burden, because especially when you say to one of my best friends, she's not spiritual at all. She's open-minded, but she's not got that aspect. She's a Gemini, I think Gemini rising. I think she's an Aries moon. So she just hasn't got, she's just not interested. But that's what we get on, you see. We're total polar opposites. But she had a friend of hers that was using her, and I could see it. Oh my God, I could see right through this woman. And I said to my best friend, I was like, look, this woman's using you for what she can get. You know that, don't you? She's like, don't be silly. She's lovely. And in the end, my friend got hurt. And then she called me. She's like, yeah, you were right. And I went, I know. But it's difficult when other people can't see it. And I think that is the biggest burden for me, is when people can't see what I can see, and you wish that they could. God, the world would be a better place if people could just see who's toxic and who isn't. But then it's not life experience if we all knew. So
yeah, and we all have our own ways of sort of like picking up on these things and reading the energy too. So, you know, sometimes it takes some time to, you know, play around with it, to have those bad experiences in order to, you know, acquire the gifts, right? Acquire the gifts of discernment, the gifts of understanding, the gifts of being able to read people in this way. And so, yeah, that can absolutely be it. And sometimes these people too, they're not self-aware. They're not doing these things intentionally. And that's a whole other end of the spectrum, right? Mm. And so that shows up in another way with a lot of Neptune energy and a lot of Pluto energy. Sometimes people who are manipulative and vampiric, you know, they lack that self-awareness when it shows up in certain specific configurations and aspects in the chart. Also, Gemini, like Sun, and to the lesser extent, the Moon, when it shows up in the 8th house or the 12th house, it can be very manipulative. Not necessarily the same as being a narcissist or being like a vampire, but they can be very, very deceptive, very manipulative, very tricky. They're tricksters. And that's, again, not everyone who has Gemini in these houses. So if you're listening to this, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's you. But they have that ability, that capability somewhere within them, and sometimes they will act on that. And when there's a Neptune involvement, or even like a K2, like South Node involvement with the Sun in one of these aspects, then a lot of times they just lack self-awareness. Or if the Sun is in an Inconjunction, because Sun Inconjunction people, they tend to lack a certain level of self-awareness, because they're usually showing up to play a certain role that has been deemed appropriate by like their family or by society. And so they lack a certain level of self-awareness. They think that they know who they are, but truly they don't. And so when they take action, they're not acting from a place of authenticity. And they can be more prone, especially in Gemini, to, you know, manipulating other people, or prone to becoming susceptible to manipulation as well. But so these are the manipulators, right? And again, not everyone with Gemini is going to be like this. Not everybody with these placements. It's just a difficult placement for the Sun in Gemini to be in the 8th or the 12th. And, you know, that's
my daughter has that placement. And I tell you something, yeah, she's nearly 9, but I tell you, it's happening already. It's just little things like my son's a Sagittarius. So oh my God, they fight so much. It's ridiculous. They could be sat in a room together, and I can be watching them, mind, and she'll go, ow, he just hit me, Mom. And I'm like, no, he really didn't. I just watched it. That didn't even happen. Like, but they can be. They are the tricksters. You're right. Absolutely bang on. They are. They're the ones that. I mean, she has a Pisces moon, so she's like extremely emotional. My son also has a Pisces moon. Whereas I wanted to touch on this actually. My daughter, my youngest daughter, she's 2.5, and she has a Libra sun, a Libra rising, but she has a Virgo moon. Now, obviously, that is total polar opposite to me. And I've already started to see that. And I find it amazing how your child can also show their astrology at such a young age.
Yeah.
My God, I cannot tell her what to do. Like, but do you think that, do you find that certain types, certain signs in the moon can have that effect of, they can come across as being extremely harsh, or that, they could have bad intentions anyway, but does that come across in the moon? Or is that just like my daughter, for instance, she's just plain awkward, like.
I mean, the moon, you don't necessarily see it right away. So that's kind of where it's a little bit more covert if there are those sorts of tendencies, right?
Yeah.
Just because when you first meet someone, right, you usually see a combination of their sun and their rising sign. That's more physical. It has more to do with physicality and the personality, whereas the moon is your internal self. And so people, when they get to know you, they'll start to see that. And so that is where a lot of the tendencies can be like sort of hidden away, right? Because your moon drives you through emotion, through feeling, through intuition. It's sort of your internal driving force. It's what you do in order to obtain safety and security and that sense of stability, that sense of comfort. And so when your moon is, let's say like you have a moon in Gemini and it's in the 8th house or something like that, if you feel like your comfort, your safety, your stability, right? And not stability, but your comfort and your safety, because that has to do with the moon, your feeling of inner security, inner safety. If you feel like that's being compromised, you might actually lash out and manipulate somebody, in order to get that comfort back or to take back control so you feel more safe and more secure. And so a lot of times it's usually a feeling of a lack of safety, a lack of security, or they just feel like they need a little bit more nurturing, right? Maybe with your daughter, she just wants a little bit more attention. She wants to be, hugged and coddled a little bit more. So she pretends she's getting hit. So you'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Whatever it is that happens.
Yeah, she's a Pisces moon. That's typical. Like, I can see, to me, to be honest with you, I look at her and I see more of her Piscean side than I do her Gemini. Like already I see her moon rather than her sun sign. Like people say, oh, she's so emotional. I'm like, yeah, I know. But my daughter, you see, like, oh, she is just typical Libra. Like my youngest, she's typical Libra. It's shocking how Libra she is. Like if you can get a child that's the most Libra of all, it's her. Like, but yeah, I find it fascinating that they show these traits. My son as well, Pisces moon. I think he's or ascendant, but he is so emotional, but he's so compassionate, and I see that he is the male version of me, and it's quite frightening when I look at him, and I see him getting hurt, and I see that people manipulate him from a young age, like his little friends when they pick on him, and he's like, "It's okay, I forgive you," and I'm like, "No!" Like, but at the same time, you just think, to be honest with you, you want them to have that life experience to be stronger people. These future generations are going to change our world. So fingers crossed they're going to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, do you want to kind of like leave it on that note? Do you have any final thoughts about the topic at hand?
The only advice I can give to any of you out there that are kind of sat there going, I think I know a narcissist, or I think I know a psychic vampire. Like we've both said, you need to set boundaries. They are the most important things in the world that you have to do. You have got to, if you don't find those boundaries, you will become probably like myself in the past, where you've met people, you've let them manipulate you, and you've the one that's ended up being on rock bottom, having a breakdown, So you have to set those boundaries. If you feel in your heart something is wrong, that's because it is. So if your heart's telling you, say no, then say no, and don't be afraid to hold back. Just don't hold back and just say it. Just say how it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, because, usually it's caring too much about what the other person thinks when the other person is the one that's manipulating you, right? So why do you care what they think?
Exactly.
So yeah, be more assertive. And if you can't be assertive, just distancing yourself completely, right? If you don't have it in you to stand up for yourself, to stand up to that person, a really easy thing to do is to kind of like ghost them, right? Like distance yourself, take that space. And if you don't know who's doing it, but you feel that there's a sense of something going wrong, just distance yourself from everybody for a few days. You'll start to learn. You'll start to figure it out. The people that are trying to take your energy, the people that are vampiric, that are manipulative, they're going to feel that silence and that distance from you, and they're going to come right back in and be like, "What's wrong? Did you do something? I love you." Blah blah blah. Like you'll know. Like,
and it's all because with a typical narcissist anyway, they have to be in control, and as soon as you take away their control, they panic. And
Exactly.
trust me when I say this, you are stronger than what that narcissist is. They panic. Trust me. I've seen it so many times. Like they're like, oh my God, I must hurt them to regain control. And, you know, they might say to you, oh, well, I was in a very abusive relationship in the past. Extremely manipulative, extremely narcissistic. And I said to him, before I decided to make a YouTube channel, this is going back 6 or so years, I said to him, like, I want to be out there. Like, I think I want to be a journalist or something. Like, I want to be like a reporter on TV or something. I just wanted to be helping people. And he turned around and he went, well, why the hell would anyone want to listen to you? And that actually, I'm glad he said that, because that made me go, okay, I'm going to go find out why I want to be helping people and why I want to be spreading a message to the world. I need to find out why that is. And then I did find out, and I'm like, hi. The best thing you could have done. And so you have to take the negative and wrap it around and turn it into a positive. So that's like probably the best advice I can give. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. That was very helpful information. And I hope that everyone on this channel found this information to be useful in some sort of way, especially those of you that have, the aspects, the alignments that we talked about, because it can be very difficult, especially, as you're younger, but even, up into an older age, you'll still come across, variations of this energy. So anyway, thank you so much for doing this talk with me. This has been really great, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Yes, it was absolutely fun. Yeah, it was the second time. It was great. So I really enjoyed it. We work really well together. So
yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.